let's get to Kathleen Willey, who is with us now. Kathleen's been on our show several times in the past. As you know, her history, Kathleen Willey was the young lady that was in Bill Clinton's Oval Office that has alleged that she was sexually assaulted by the former president. And she was also got to go to one of the debates. I can't think of which one it was. I think St. Louis, if I remember. And she's with us now. Kathleen, great to have you with us.
Good morning. How are you?
Never better. You're here with Jim McKelvey and Senator Stanley.
Good morning,
and I know
gentlemen.
Senator.
Good morning, Kathleen. Good morning.
I'm for Cleveland.
All right, way to go, Kathleen. Let's go Indians. I need that 2/3.
For totally non-athletic reasons. It's only because Rahm Emanuel is the mayor of Chicago.
Wait a minute. Maybe I need to change my loyalty. She's just brought out a very good point.
That's how I think. That's how I
That's
look
good
at
thinking.
things.
Is Dennis Kucinich, is he still the mayor of Cleveland, or was that back in the 70s?
That was back in the day, I think.
Wasn't he the youngest mayor,
was.
in history, 25 years old?
He was.
I was in college when he was mayor. That shows her how old I am. Okay, Kathleen, you went to the debate. Tell us about that, why you went, and some of what's gone on.
Wow, that was the most incredible experience of my life. I have to say, I'm still trying to process all of it. We got a late afternoon phone call on the Saturday before the debate on Sunday, basically saying be on the 7:00 plane the next morning. And I mean, I had to drop everything and get my dogs and cats taken care of and pack and you all the things you have to do to go on a trip like that. And everything was, undercover. They didn't want anybody to know that they were there or to notice us on the airplane. And we pulled it off. And nobody knew. Nobody knew until right before the debate, and absolutely pulled the rug out from underneath the Clintons. And it was just an amazing experience. It really was. I think the things that people ask me, the things that I remember the most is what they did to keep it all so quiet was that Donald Trump called for a short pre-debate press conference right before the debate. It must have been 20 minutes before the debate. And we were in a small room sitting at a table. And we really weren't, they didn't even give us a lot of information about, what was coming. And the next thing we knew, in walked Donald Trump. And I had never met him before. And the thing that struck me the most about him is you see him with all his bravado and the way he is. I was so impressed with how soft-spoken he was, and thankful and grateful, and how well he spoke. But I think the thing that if my iPhone camera's battery hadn't worn down, when the small press gaggle came in, they thought they were just going to have this conference with Donald Trump. If you could have seen the looks on their faces when they saw us sitting there at that table with them, you would have paid. I would have paid any amount of money that I had for just one picture of the looks on their faces. Their mouth dropped down to their feet when they saw us sitting there. And then, of course, there was all kinds of negotiations. The Clintons went into overdrive. And, when you usually have where everybody shakes hands, the families, and, before the debate, well, of course, none of us were going to shake his hands. But basically, at least the Clintons decided they didn't want to walk by and acknowledge anybody involved with any of the Trump family or anybody. And so we saw Clinton come in, and, I mean, he looked like he'd just been hit by a truck. And we had a straight line of vision to him. But the only way that he could look at us is that he would have had to look over his right shoulder. And we never saw him do that. And we just saw the pictures of him when he came in and when he sat down, and I mean, he wasn't looking all that great. He really wasn't. I think the other thing that really struck me is that when we were in the family waiting area, right before we went into the convention center, that the whole Trump family was there, and each and every one of them came up to us and thanked us by name for being there and for helping us, and I was really impressed with that. And the Clintons ordered Trumps that we were not to sit with the family, and if that we tried to, that we would be removed. And the word I heard after that was that Mr. Trump said, "Well, you just go ahead and try doing that," and we wound up sitting with the family.
That was nice.
So, it was just an amazing experience. It was interesting to watch when Mr. Trump announced our presence and talked about the horrible things and the names that she had called us and the things that Bill Clinton had done to us. She had no answers whatsoever. She just sat there and didn't say a word. Yep. She didn't try to defend herself or him or anything. She just sat and didn't say one word.
That's indefensible.
It was very helpful to all of us there.
I have two questions. So my first is, when you were at the debate, seated there, did you ever actually make eye contact with her when she was on the stage? Did she ever look over at any of you? She just avoided you guys.
No.
Do you
she
feel
knew
that
where we were, but she never looked in our direction.
Did that day, Kathleen, did that experience, did that bring any form of closure to any of this for yourself or Juanita or for Paula Jones? Any of it? Or was it just, I mean, like, were you able to say, okay, we came, we saw, we went, there's a closure now? Or does that closure come on November 8th when Trump wins?
Well, it'll certainly come on November 8th when Donald Trump becomes president. But being there and being acknowledged and being and having the whole situation addressed and seeing him accuse her of that and him of that was certainly cathartic for all of us. I was worried about Juanita at first. We were all together because she gets so emotional when she talks about what he did to her, which was so brutal, and I was really kind of concerned for her. But and she got a little teary. Well, we all did at first. And when it all started, and when we sat, and then when he started talking about us, but the longer it went on, and we really kind of got into it, and I mean, we had our little inside jokes that we shared with each other, and laughed at a lot of the things that a lot of other people in the stadium were laughing at, and it turned into a wonderful experience. I think the thing that the thing that I didn't know about was the spin room. I didn't know what that was about. They just said, this is where we're going to go next. And everybody in the press was cordoned off, and there were just hundreds and hundreds of them. And, I've never been in a situation where I've got about 50 microphones stuck in my face with people asking me questions, a lot of them trying to bait us. A lot of them making false accusations. And I just said to the other women, I said, we just have to stick to our talking points and explain why we were here. And I was surprised at the number of women reporters who said, well, don't you feel used? I mean, you've been used, and then this is nothing but a distraction. And I said, absolutely not. If I had any feeling whatsoever that I was being used, I wouldn't be here. Well, how much do you pay you? How much is he paying you to be here? And I said, absolutely nothing. They pay for our transportation and our accommodations, just like Fox News does, or MSNBC, or CNN when they invite guests to be on their shows. That's exactly what they did for us. And we just stuck to our talking points. I mean, Juanita did talk some about what had happened to her, but I basically just said, no, I don't feel used. No, I don't feel like that I was here as a distraction. I'm here with a message, and my message is this. Rape, as CNN and Jake Tapper and Andrea Mitchell and all the rest of them would like you to believe, that, rape is not an infidelity, sexual assault is not an infidelity, and sexual harassment is not an infidelity. These are crimes and these are felonies, and people go to jail for these crimes. And no champion of women attacks victims of rape and sexual assault. And those are our talking points, and that's what we stuck with.
And Kathleen, this is Bill Stanley, and I think, just for historical perspective, what bothers me the most, and you said it when you opened, and that's the one time, as an attorney, I don't like when you say alleged, because I know for a fact that what happened to Kathleen was a fact, in fact happened. And they want to turn it, and they've done it since, we represented Paula Jones. I was one of her, in fact, I was in law school when we first got the case. And when we got that case, we flew down to Little Rock, Arkansas, and already their machine was at full tilt. And why it was at full tilt was because this was a woman who did not want anything more than her reputation restored, because it was besmirched in the American Spectator news article about Trooper.
I remember it all.
Right. And so when we got ready to file, what many people don't know is Clinton's team, his legal team, and us, we reached an agreement for no money, but just for an apology from him, a statement from him in the Oval Office. And he would also agree not to say anything or have his surrogate say anything for 6 months. Otherwise, she could bring back that suit. So it stood as the apology she wanted. No money, just an apology. The night we had settled it, he was going to read it the next day. It was the last day to file the agreement. That's when you heard, and this is coming from Hillary Clinton and that machine that wanted to destroy women. And Paula Jones is a very good person of high moral character and integrity.
I know that.
And they were on Crossfire, and I think it was James Carville who said, well, that's what you get when you drag $100 through a trailer park. We were at a restaurant. And she stood up and she looked at all of us and said, we hadn't even gotten our dinner, and she said, I'm not settling. I told you they were going to do this. And she walked out with her husband at the time. And so we filed that lawsuit. Fast forward, what happened in that time was, it wasn't about, oh my God, you were attacked. It was, what's wrong with you? And that was the Hillary Clinton motif. That was their modus operandi, and it carried on to Kathleen Willey. And I'll tell you, for our historical perspective and how Kathleen and I met inadvertently, when we won that Supreme Court case, we got a call at our office one night from a woman who did not want to identify herself, but said she supported Paula because it had happened to her. She would not give us her name. We were able to get a couple facts from her conversation with us. And she told us a story that was bone-chilling and horrible, of a sexual assault, an attack by the president, not the governor, like when Paula Jones was attacked, but now the president of the United States in the pantry of off the Oval Office. Unfortunately, and I must apologize only, Kathleen, because she didn't call us to try to make a name for herself or be public. She was just voicing her support. And from what we gleaned from that conversation, we were able to determine that person that called us, retelling a very chilling tale of a sexual abuse in the White House, was none other than Kathleen Willey. We served her with a subpoena to be a witness in the case in Richmond. Judge Marriage, who is now deceased, was overseeing that subpoena. Clinton's people were in a panic. Number one, they were willing to settle with Paula because they knew Paula was true. They knew it was true, and they were willing to make that statement with Clinton. Two, they were trying anything they could to quash that subpoena and make sure she never testified. Why? Because they knew it was true. And I'll tell you, and Kathleen, I don't even know if you know this or not, but guess what? We had sued for $600,000. Because of our subpoena served on Kathleen Willey, we had an offer from the president's attorney for $800,000, $200,000 more than we had sued for, which proves to me, as we always knew it to be true, that she was telling the truth. Kathleen is a truth teller.
Bill says, drop alleged. Okay.
Yeah.
Kathleen Willey was sexually assaulted in the Oval Office by President Bill Clinton back in the 90s. And, you were telling the story about how this whole thing went down.
Yeah, well, and just to reiterate, I mean, Kathleen Willey was not a willing participant in anything. We were working for Paula Jones at the time. We just won a Supreme Court judgment 9-0 that said the president could be sued for his private acts. And it really turned the case. And at that point in time, that's when she had made an anonymous phone call, and just in support of Paula. And, just from some of the facts that we had garnered from that conversation, we were able to determine that it was Miss Willey, and we served her immediately with a subpoena. It wasn't like she asked for that, and unfortunately, we thrust her into a spotlight which she never asked for. And quite frankly, she was treated the same way as Paula Jones and Juanita Broderick was after it came out. But the telling thing, again, just to reiterate is, and I want to make clear, President Clinton would not have offered to make an apology in the White House press room for Paula Jones unless he knew it happened. And likewise, as soon as we had filed the subpoena and served it on her, our fax machine, and back then they were thermal faxes, so they start rolling out in curls, starts buzzing with a motion to quash that subpoena. Why were they so worried about Miss Willey? What about that was a concern? And then to have the insurance company that was backing had an umbrella policy for President Clinton, and his attorney offering full what we'd sued for, $600, and we said that wasn't enough. They offered $800,000, and as a part of that was that so Kathleen Willey's deposition, her testimony under oath, would never take place. That to me is another indication, not that it's alleged, but that what Kathleen Willey has said and has been consistent about every single day that it has been of that topic is the absolute truth, that this predator continued from governor to president to abuse women, and more importantly, his wife not only condoned that conduct, let it occur, she led the charge because of her own personal ambitions to destroy the reputation of these very, very good people, because her desire for power was greater than the truth. Her desire for her own, her own gratification was worth trampling on people that never asked for this. Paula Jones never asked for then Governor Clinton to sexually assault her. Kathleen Willey never asked for him to do what he did to her. And quite frankly, both of them just went away shaken and dealing with them on their own until, one, the American Spectator article came out against Paula, and two, when we served her with that subpoena. But, the full knives and the pitchforks were out. And that's what, again, just shocks me, because the press did that even back then, that they would then look at Miss Willey now. These three people that are proven to have been abused by the president and the husband of person who wants to be the president are saying, who's paying you? Why are you here? Not what happened to you. Tell us what happened to you, because the public has a right to know that.
Let me add to that. Not only were they afraid of my being subpoenaed and deposed, Bob Bennett became our new best friend. I mean, here's this big Washington attorney taking a drive to Richmond once a week, trying to negotiate and trying to help us get out of this. Poor Kathleen get out of this deposition, and the whole time, every time, trying to find out from me what had happened, and I refused to tell him. Every time he asked, every time he tried to dig, every time he tried to suggest, well, it was just a boorish past, right? And every time I just had the same response. It was unexpected and unwanted. And that's what I kept saying to him. And that's when I wouldn't back down. And I wouldn't tell them what they wanted. That's when all the scary stuff started. That's when my car was vandalized, my pet disappeared, my German Shepherd, my soulmate who never left my side, disappeared for 3 whole days. I found somebody roaming around my house at 3 o'clock in the morning. But the most terrifying thing, and the thing that I want to try to get across to the young women of this country who were too young or not yet born when all this went on, is that 2 days before that deposition, I live out in the country, and I mean, I heard you say, you've got to go down a half-mile dirt road to get your house. I'm almost the same way. I mean, I am very hard to find. I live in the woods, and I mean, it's not a neighborhood. And I had a routine. and they obviously were following me. Well, I realized after a couple of months when my name came out that they were following me. People's stores I would go into, they would call me afterward. The people who waited on me, people I knew, would call and say that people would come in and ask all kinds of questions about me. But the most terrifying thing of all was that 2 days before that deposition, I was approached by somebody very early in the morning out here when I was out walking, and I thought it was a neighbor. I had just moved in, and I didn't recognize all of the people who live out here. And he stopped me, and he said, "Did you ever find your cat?" And I said, "No, every time I drive down the driveway, I know he's going to be waiting for me on the front step, and, I really miss him." He was a family member. He's a 13-year-old, just a great gold guy, and that's when he said, "Yeah, that Bullseye was a great cat." And I had put signs up without my name, but my phone number, but with pictures of him with his name tag that had his name on it, Bullseye, and for people to keep an eye out for him. So when he said that, I said, "What do you know him?" And he kept saying, "Yeah, he was a really good cat." And I said, "How do you know that? Who are you?" And that's when he said, "Did you ever get the tires fixed on your car?" And that's when I knew. That's when I knew I was in big trouble. And I kept demanding to know who he was. And he never answered. But then he threatened my children. Who lived out of town. By name, he recited their addresses to me. Then he threatened the 2 young children by name of one of my best friends, and then and they did one other. He threatened someone else that I've never really been able to talk about. But I want the world to know that this grandmother, threatened the children of another woman's children for her own benefit. She took personal betrayals and turned them into political opportunities. This is the kind of woman who wants to be in the Oval Office, and that's why I'm still around 19 years later. Believe me, I've had people and friends and family say, "Why don't you just get over it? Why don't you just move on?" I love that thing, move on. Well, I'm not going to move on until she is in prison. That's when I'll be done. That's when it'll be over for me, because she is a criminal, and her husband is a criminal, and her husband is a brutal rapist. And Juanita Broderick is not the only woman, believe me. I have talked to many.
Yeah, and there's John, without going into that, there is a person out there who is in the news media who will not come forward, who has a similar story and a more graphic, just a horrible thing, but it happened to that person too.
By President Clinton.
Yes, and so what you're seeing is people, mostly he's been banking on that they don't want to come forward, or he uses they're using that powerful position that will crush you. And then by example, those other who it's happened to, they've seen what's happened to those women that have come forward and have made those claims. And when Kathleen talks about, and when Kathleen talks about, the cat story and those issues, and somebody may say, well, that just seems silly, absurd. Let me tell you, as the attorney, as one of the attorneys, I served with Joe Camerata and Gil Davis in Gil Davis's law firm in Fairfax, Virginia. When we went to Arkansas, when we were getting ready to file the suit, and I'd left law school, I was a law student, to be there to go and be a part of that and to help them. We stayed at a certain hotel. When we came back, it appeared that someone had been through our stuff. We had heard stories in Arkansas that would make your hair stand on end. And on top of that, when we got back to Fairfax afterwards, 2 things happened that were of note. One was our office was broken into very professionally. And then with all the computers and all the expensive stuff that Gil had in his office, pens, everything, that someone who's getting in there for a reason of larceny, of stealing, would have taken, nothing was moved, but our files were completely disturbed. The second thing, so that was one of these things where someone was in there for reasons other than stealing when they break in. The second time is that we had trouble with our fax machine. it was kind of printing on half sheets of paper. Weird things was happening. By that time, we had a Paula Jones legal foundation, a legal fund. And so we had Cindy Hayes, who was the wife of the clerk of the House of Representatives at the time. She was running it. Weird things were happening with our faxes. So we had somebody, back in the day, fax machines were the way to communicate. We didn't have smartphones and computers and the internet. And so we had somebody do an investigation and go through that. They tracked that our faxes, at the same time they were being sent to us, were being sent to a fax machine in a federal building, which turned out to be an empty office. And Cindy being, having a husband who was with the House of Representatives, we were able to determine that. So somebody was getting our faxes, our personal confidential faxes, to try to find out what we were doing. You don't do that. You don't harass people unless you know you're hiding the truth.
Thing. Somebody broke into my house while I was asleep upstairs. And they didn't take anything of any value. They took the hard copy of my book that I was editing right before publication. That's what they took.
Yeah. So when somebody says that there is this kind of surreal corruption, and then it's surrounded by this illegal or potentially illegal conduct, and somebody say, "Oh, that's foolhardy," or "That's outlandish," "That's not right," believe them. I believe them. And you know why? Because I was there. And I'm not, look, I'm a lawyer, I'm a senator, I'm a husband and a father. I believe in God, and I believe in fair play and this democracy and this republic that we live in. They don't play by those rules. Mm-hmm. And nothing, if they're willing to be corrupt, they were corrupt in the 70s in Arkansas, they were corrupt in the 80s in Arkansas, they're corrupt in the 90s in Washington, D.C. That corruption has continued, and they've gotten away with it because they think they're impervious. They think they can do anything, and it's worked for them before. Why not now? You have a whole team that worked on what Hillary Clinton said were these bimbo eruptions to find out all the bad things they possibly could find. I think it was Judicial Watch did a subpoena to Carville or one of their political operatives under the Freedom of Information Act or some lawsuit that was going on, and there were files on me and Gil.
On you?
Yes, had my transcripts of my law school transcripts in there, and Gil Davis and Joe Camerata.
Thousands of dollars. Hundreds of thousands.
Why would you do that?
Of dollars
why would you do that, Bill?
I know.
Yeah, but they had my transcripts are not supposed to be released unless I tell them, but they had a copy. So what did they find from it? I got a C in environmental law. Way to go, guys. But they're willing to do anything to destroy those people that dare stand up to them, like a Kathleen Willey, like a Juanita Broddick, like my friend Paula Jones. And God bless them for doing it, because there's a lot more people out there that have just hid in the shadows because they're afraid of what is potentially could happen to them. Could happen to them. And has happened to them. I speak the truth.
Juanita and I were talking yesterday about that. Can you imagine how many who are out there that are afraid to talk? I can't. I would say in the thousands. The man is an out of control pervert. It's as simple as that. He is an out of control pervert. And he has done whatever he's wanted to do with women since before his days in college.
And is now acceptable
because of his position in government. And women have been terrorized and have been literally scared to death to report anything to anybody. And I understand that. I know why. The women who have called me and told me their horror stories, and God love them. I don't blame them. I mean, I'm glad to give them the opportunity just to be able to tell their story and just to get it off of their backs, because most of them, like me, my generation, blamed ourselves. What did we do? Did we wear the wrong clothes? Did we ask for something? Did we suggest something? Did we bring it on ourselves? I mean, I know Juanita did. I mean, I know I did. I mean, and to hear these women tell, just to let them tell their stories, even if they couldn't go public, was just such a good thing for me and for them. And maybe one day more of them will be able to come out. Maybe when these two finally wind up in prison, they'll feel safe enough to come out and tell their stories. Maybe then. But I just feel sorry for the ones that just have kept it in and have been too afraid to talk. My heart goes out to them.
Think about, that they claim to be the party and the candidates that support women, and yet what they've done is a path of personal destruction, of really what is the mantra of blame the victim. We see that even just now, blame Comey. a man of integrity in July is now blame him for this. It's not personal accountability. And our founding fathers, when they created this great country, did so because of what they saw in the corruption of a king and the tyranny of a king. That pales, in my opinion, in comparison to what we've seen from the Clinton machine in terms of continued corruption. And, Thomas Jefferson said, vigilance is the eternal price of liberty. And it is up to us, the people, whether it be a Kathleen Willey or a Paula Jones, a Juanita Broderick, or John Fredericks, or Jim McKelvey, to stand up and say that our country is not going to be subjected to those that would take advantage and not adhere to those principles which we live under and the freedom that we enjoy. To do this to a woman, anyone like this, is deplorable, to use her word. To do it for power is illegal, immoral, and not what we stand for. And that's why, if anything, you should go and not vote for her because of what they represent and also what they've done.
I mean, if she's president, she has all this power, so it takes it to the next level, right?
Absolutely. I don't think, remember, you have the Department of Justice, the FBI, you have all of these tools in the toolbox now to carry on whatever you're going to do. You're going to elect, the potential is to elect somebody who's under criminal investigation from the FBI who, in theory, could pardon herself. In theory, but also has a lot of debts to pay for those that have covered her 6 o'clock in these kind of corruption scandals, in this kind of abuse of women, and this kind of abuse of the reputation of women, and plus you're going to put Bill Clinton back in the old driver's seat of the many-roomed White House to do what he did in the past and is willing to do before. This is outrageous if you think about it. If they had a Republican, an R next to their name, they would never get within 300 yards of the White House. They would have to have one of those passes to go visit the White House. You would never, the press wouldn't allow it. Republicans themselves, policing themselves, would never allow this to happen. We'd never allow this. But yet, he is heralded. They say, oh, it's just boorish behavior. Bob Bennett, who she speaks to, was Bill Clinton's attorney in the Paula Jones case from the beginning to the end. And so, he wants to excuse it. He wants to play nice. That is just another agent of the Clintons doing what the Clintons' bidding is to keep them in power and not have them be held accountable for their actions.
Well,
It's
do you
unbelievable.
hear how nice he is? The day after my 60 Minutes interview on live television, and I can't say the exact words that he used, but he used the real words. He said, Kathleen Willey is an effing female floozy flake.
Unbelievable. And that's the same thing that they'd said about Paula. That's it.
Yep.
Here, Paula Jones was from Lone Oak, Arkansas. Was working as a government employee and was taken up to a room because the governor wanted to meet her. His state trooper turned to his Clinton turned to his state trooper and said, "You see that girl over there? She makes my knees weak. Bring her up." And he'd have his little room. She didn't know it. She thought she was going to meet the governor. She didn't want to go, but her friend said, "Go ahead." Pamela Blackwell and her friend said, "Go ahead, just meet the governor." Not thinking that what was going to happen was the door was going to close. He was going to grab a hold of her and sexually abuse her. She didn't ask for that.
Help because my husband was in trouble, who committed suicide that afternoon. I mean, did I think that was going to happen?
Right.
Didn't ask for it. It's just, I mean, he is just, pond scum. I mean, it's just, there's no words for this human being. And his wife, who just, I mean, to sit here, I've called the Trump campaign and I said, please, I mean, we've got 6 days left. Get us out there. I mean, they have no defense now. They've got two defenses. They're pulling out the old right-wing conspiracy playbook. That's what they're doing. And they're attacking Jim Comey, and now they're bringing out the former Miss Universe and talking about all the horrible names that Donald Trump called her. Well, I would like to be able to stand on the stage and introduce Donald Trump or go out as a surrogate, and I want to say she and her surrogate called us whores, sluts, Looney Tunes, trailer trash, skanks. They paid $100,000 back in the 80s, which was a lot of money, to Jack Palladino, a private investigator who they had on retainer for years now, the order from Hillary Clinton to him for $100,000 was destroy Jennifer Flowers. Now, well, I want to get up on a stage in the next 6 days. Send us anywhere. We have all talked about it. Just give us send us out and let the people know, let the women know the names that she has called us. Okay? And these are verified. It's just like you said. You've got James Carville saying that on television. I've seen all of. We have it all verified on television. I mean,
okay, Kathleen,
supposedly these things Trump said about this woman. There's not one person out there who's verified.
Kathleen, we're out of time.
I
got to take off. We will have you back before November 8th. Thank you so much for your time.